Well, friends, welcome to this midweek message. My name is Phil Harrington. I am the rector of St Mary's, West Horsley, and I'm not going to lie, this is my third or fourth attempt at trying to say something and offer the right words into the current context of the last few weeks since the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter campaign. I tried at the end of last week and I wasn't really happy with what I had recorded, but the conviction and the sense of burden to say something has remained with me over the weekend. And like so many of us, I watched the video of George Floyd being knelt upon with a mix of horror and sadness. Horror at how somebody was being treated by those who are there to serve and protect, and sadness that it was something that was all too familiar. And there was a whisper in my heart, is anything ever going to change? And that is part of the motivation for this campaign. Whilst I disagree with the violence and destruction that we have witnessed at some of the demonstrations in the US and in the UK. I was glad that some people were out demonstrating and doing so with real passion. Now, if I'm honest, there is a tension within me seeing so many thousands of people gathering in close proximity whilst we are in the midst of a pandemic. And particularly when it has reminded us that our sort of well-being is tied up in how we act and treat each other. But what happened to George Floyd was wrong. Black Lives Matter. Now, I do have some sympathy for those who have tried to respond by saying that all lives matter, because they do. And from the womb to the tomb, the Bible is really clear that human life is precious because we are made in the image of God. But the Black Lives Matter campaign is a cry from the heart to try and remind people that for centuries it has seemed that actually black lives seem to matter a whole lot less than white lives. That black lives can be easily traded merely as objects. That black people can be treated with disrespect, with hostility, with ambivalence and disdain. That it doesn't really matter that there isn't actually equality of opportunity for so many people within the black community. And I think actually now the Black Lives Matter campaign is a cry from so many people from across different walks of life to say this is not on. People who are trying again to raise the point that Black Lives Matter. And actually that's not been the case for such a long time. And that is an important voice that many of us need to hear. And it was brought home to me personally at the end of last week when I saw an interview with a friend of mine, Jason. Now Jason is the pastor of a small church up in West London. I've known him for many years. And Jason is also black. Now, he was being interviewed by a mutual friend of ours, a guy called Andy, who is also the pastor of a church, and Andy is white. And Jason was just asked to share what it was like to grow up as a young boy and teenager and man in London. And Jason had shared a little bit about what it was like to be the only black pupil in his school and what his experiences were of just going about his daily life. Over the last 2 or 3 decades. And they figured out together that Jason and Andy had lived in London pretty much all their lives, so a similar amount of time. And Jason said to Andy, Andy, how many times have you been stopped and searched? And Andy could say very quickly, none. I've never been stopped and searched. And Jason shook his head and said, Andy, I've lost count about the amount of times that I have been stopped and searched. It's too numerous. Although I do remember the time that I was stopped and searched on my way to preach at your church. And that was the thing that hit me. There are Jason and Andy, two people who have had similar life stories. They've both had the opportunity of education. They both came to faith as Christians. They both now lead churches. They've had the same theological training. And yet, their experience of living in London was profoundly different because of the difference in their skin colour. And all lives matter, of course they do. But at the moment, that is not the lived reality of so many people around the world. And we need to hear their cry. And then I think for change to really occur, it's going to start with each and every one of us in the quietness of examining our own hearts and seeing where the prejudice lies. For some of us, we really do need to acknowledge before God that there is racism in our hearts. We need to repent of that. We need to ask for God's forgiveness of that, be cleansed of it. But for others of us, it will be different groups of people or different sections of community that we have a prejudice against. And when we have acknowledged that and repented of it, we don't just stay there. We then actually need to take a step forward and to be a people who will reach across the cultural barriers and be people who will bring hope and reconciliation and healing and God's love into people's lives. Now, as I end, I was reminded of the question that is asked in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. And the question is, what does God require of us? And the answer so famously given is this: to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And so there is a call upon us as a church, both locally and nationally, for us to do just that, to be a people who will stand against injustice in whatever form it takes. And that at the moment is for us to hear the cry of so many people, not just black people, but so many people, to remind others that black lives matter. And we need to play our part in that as God's hands and feet on earth. Be people who will proclaim God's love to everyone, regardless of their skin colour. And so, friends, I hope that is helpful to you. I'm acutely aware that there have been more eloquent responses to this, but I hope that in some way helps you to navigate what you're seeing all around you. And may God bless you, and I appreciate you listening to this message. Take care.